Hi, this is Yolanda Vanveen from vanveenbulbs.com, and in this segment we're going to talk about how to grow calla lilies, some of my favorite plants from South Africa. So in order to know how to grow them, we need to figure out where they're native and what their native conditions are. And there's two families of calla lilies that grow in very different conditions. So we got to figure out what part of South Africa are they from and what conditions do they grow in. So when most people think of calla lilies, they think of the traditional white calla, the calla lilies are in bloom calla. Now they are from the western side of South Africa. So they really like moist, cooler conditions because of the Atlantic Ocean. Very stormy. They can handle shade or they can handle some sun as well if you're near the coast. And they can sit right in a bog of water because they're from a very wet winter area. Whereas the colored calla lilies are different altogether. They are from the other side of South Africa, the eastern side, and they have the influence of the Indian Ocean, which is very, very warm compared to the Atlantic Ocean. And they're from a much more arid desert region, so they will rot right out if they sit in water. They like full hot sun. They won't bloom in the shade, whereas the white callas in most conditions love the shade. So you've got to realize, are they the traditional white calla, which is from the western side, or the colored callas, or the xanthodiecias. So Aethiopica, usually the white calla is from this side, and the xanthodiecias are from that side. So when you're planting the bulbs themselves look totally different. If they're the colored callas or the xanthodiecias, they have more of a round, a circular, flatter bulb, and they look like the sun. So I remember if it's a sun-shaped, it's probably a colored calla. You want to plant that. There's a side that has a bullseye. That looks up. If you can't tell, go sideways. Plant it about 3 inches deep and put it in the sunniest, hottest spot you can find. If you live in a really warm climate, though, you can put them in shade. If you're in Southern California, they do better in shade. If you're in the Northwest, they have to have full hot sun to bloom. Whereas the traditional white calla is more of a raindrop shaped. It looks like a big fat side and then it tapers down to a shorter side. So these like more wet conditions and shady conditions. So a lot of times they'll cook in the heat of the sun unless you live on the coast where it's a little bit colder. So when you're planting either one of them, I always plant them in a container about 3 inches deep. So I would fill the container about halfway full and just set the bulb either sideways or up and down because they grow from every little knob and every little piece will regenerate. So that's why once you've got them, you'll never get rid of them. And then just cover it so it's at least about 3 inches deep. Okay. And I just got the top of the stem coming up, and then I'm going to put that in. This is a traditional white calla, so in the Northwest I'm putting it in part shade because it'll sunburn in the full hot sun. If you live in a mild climate, even in the Northwest, most years that they'll winter over in the ground. As long as they're in raised beds with good drainage and you mulch them well, you never lose them, just as long as you've got those colored ones in full sun. Now if you live in a warmer climate, you don't have to worry about it. Just leave them in the ground. They'll come back from year to year. And even if you live in a mild climate, I always say if you put them in a pot, keep the pot dry for the winter, especially on the colored ones, because you can lose them real easily in the pots. They rot real easily, whereas the traditional white calla will never rot when it's wet. But it will freeze out if that pot turns into an ice cube. So if you live in a colder climate where it could turn into an ice cube, protect it inside in the winter. And you can enjoy either kind of calla in almost any climate. They're both gorgeous additions to your garden.